Okay, happy Monday, everybody. I know this time it's all being weird, but we're getting back on track. This week's Parsha is Parsha Vayigash. We have Asar Teves, the 10th of Teves, which we spoke about, I think, last week a little bit. This is the fast. You're not allowed to fast on Erev Shabbos, usually, because you have to go into Shabbos with energy and joy. But there are certain fasts which they're so powerful and they're so meaningful that we observe them even on Friday. So one of them is Asar Teves. Just briefly, the story is the Jewish people were not acting so good at the end of the first temple period, so before Hanukkah, before Purim. We're over here about whatever year that was. The God is giving us a bunch of warnings. He's got the prophet Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu, telling us to fix your ways or repent, or you will you will see my vengeance. And we don't want to listen to Jeremiah to the extent, Yirmiyahu, to the extent we actually put him in jail, because we know the idea is when a prophet says a prophecy, that's when it can come true. But as long as people don't hear the prophecy, then it won't come true. So they stuck him in jail, hoping that they wouldn't be able to hear it. That's why Jonah ran away, right? Jonah, he ran away because he didn't actually want to say the prophecy that God said. And Jeremiah ends up saying the prophecy. We don't fix ourselves. 100 years earlier, we hid the Aron Kodesh, the Ark that was in the Holy of Holies, and that Indiana Jones is looking for. And he finds. No, they hid the Ark. King Solomon, when he built the temple, knew that one day it will be destroyed. So he made a little, he made some trap doors and a lot of staircases to go all the way down, and room, deep room after deep room. It's hidden deep beneath the temple. When you go to the Western Wall in Israel, you're standing at like the top. You're standing actually above the Temple Mount, like where the temple really was. We're talking, it goes way, way deeper than that. And that's why you can take the tunnel tours, those tunnel tours, or like that's part of the tour, the tunnels that are underneath the temple. There were tunnels underneath the temple, and some of those tunnels go very deep. We don't even know, we haven't even discovered all of them. King Solomon built secret doors underneath the temple because he knew one day that the temple would be destroyed, and he didn't want anybody to take the Ark, the Aron Kodesh, so he placed it in there. And that's where it remained since then. So about 100 years before the destruction of the first temple, Chizkiyahu HaMelech, I believe, King Chizkiyahu hid it underneath there. So the big question is, how could you have a temple and do all of the work in the temple, like bringing the karbanot, the sacrifices, and going into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur, and doing all these things, if the Ark is not in there? The Ark is the most essential part of the temple. So what's the answer? The answer is there's two places for the Ark. You can either have it in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, or you can have it in a secret place that only King Solomon and people of the first temple knew. And that's where it is. And that's where it is today. And what's the significance of that? The temple was never fully destroyed. What it tells us is the temple was not completely destroyed because it's still in its place. The most important structure, the foundational structure, the one that gives it all of its holiness, is still in the place where it should be. So that God never really completely destroyed it. Anyway, fine. So it comes to destruction about 2 years before the complete destruction of the first temple. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylonia, comes and he can't really penetrate through the walls of Jerusalem, so he laid siege around the walls of Jerusalem. That happened on the 10th day of Teves, which we mark on Friday. Shortest fast of the year if you live in North America. Longest fast of the year if you live in the Northern Hemisphere. Longest fast of the year if you live in the Southern Hemisphere. So booyah. They laid siege. 2 years later, they broke through on Shiva Asar Tammuz on the 17th day of Tammuz, and then just 3 weeks later, Tisha B'Av, they completely destroyed the 9th day of Av. They destroyed the temple. So we mark it was the beginning of the end, and this destruction of the first temple really is the ultimate. We never fully recovered from that. We had been living in Jerusalem for hundreds and hundreds of years, and this is the first time we ever had to like disperse and leave, and we started forgetting Torah, and this is like when the whole thing happened. Most of the Jews actually just stayed in Babylonia. Even when the second temple was built, many Jews just stayed in Iraq, Iran, went to North Africa, France, that sort of area. They never even made it back to Jerusalem. So it was the beginning and end. Okay. Tanya this week. So that's gonna happen on it's a short fast. It starts at like most of us will start at 7 a.m. and end at like 5 p.m. Well, it'll end when you make kiddush, which please be careful when you make kiddush because you're gonna be on an empty stomach and it's gonna hit you hard. Some of you may like that, but some of you may not. So just be careful. What are we talking about in Tanya? Tanya talks about klipas noga and shalosh klipas tameas. So what's the opposite of godliness? There's no such thing. Godliness is everything and in everything. But God did give us the ability to make free choice. He gave us free choice, which means we have to see things as either godly or not godly. Klipa means a shell, which just means it covers over the godliness. Everything has godliness to it. God is everything. Everything is God, found in everything. So how come we don't see him? Well, it's got a shell over it. Klipa. That's what klipa is. Klipa means a shell, or as it's called in the Zohar, sitra achra, the other side, the hind part. What does a shell do? It covers over what the main substance is. You can get caught up in the shell. Yeah, clothing is just meant to be worn, and it should look nice, but sometimes we get caught up in it. That's getting caught up in klipa. So we learn that the animal soul, we have a godly soul and an animal soul. It's not really an animal soul, it's a human soul. It's distinctively human. But it's an animal. We borrow the term animal because an animal is self-serving. An animal just does whatever feels good. So you can train it to think something else feels good, just like you can train your brain to make you think something else feels good. You can train your brain to think godliness is great, or you can train your brain to think that poison is great. But you could. That's what the Tanya is coming to do. The Tanya is actually coming to train your brain. You can manipulate it however you want. And that's the idea. That's part of what we're going to do. So the animal soul, the human soul, or the animal soul comes from klipa. Now, klipa is not bad. Klipa can be either used out for good or for not good. So like, I have a phone. A phone could be used for good or it can be used for not good. It's not inherently bad. It just depends on how you utilize it. Same thing with the animal soul. The animal soul maybe is self-serving, but it could serve, it can see that godliness is good and can be used as a tremendous vehicle for godliness, or it can be used out for self purposes, just to have pleasure in life and whatnot. So it's just we talk about where the animal soul is from. There's something else called shalosh klipas hatameas. There are certain things that can never be utilized out for good in godliness. The idea is to stay away from them. They have a certain effect upon the world, and you're not to engage with it. You're not to encounter with it. You're supposed to stay away from it. And the more you stay away from it, the more it has its positive effect in the world. So like pork, for example, it's not bad. It's not like a negative trait necessarily. It all comes from godliness, but the idea you stay away from it. That's basically what Tanya is. Now, let's get into the parsha really quick. Okay, the parsha is called Vayigash. Vayigash, this is the showdown. This is when Joseph is going to meet his brothers. He's going to reveal himself to his brothers. They're going to be stunned and shocked. Now, the word Vayigash itself, first of all, the mitzvah that we learned from here, the main mitzvah of this week's parsha, is to not bear a grudge. You're not allowed to bear a grudge. You know that? Can't have a grudge. It's very unhealthy. It's also very toxic for the body. But Vayigash itself doesn't mean, it means approached, encounter. Now, in Hebrew, Vayigash, the way the Torah prescribes it, is that you're coming close, yet you're remaining distant at the same time. So we see this reflected in Yehuda approaches his brother Joseph, and Joseph approaches Yehuda, but the brothers are still reluctant to fully embrace the situation. So they're reconciling, they're coming together, but they're never fully becoming one. And we're going to see this when their father passes away 17 years later. Joseph's going to say, you guys, everything's fine. In fact, I see that it was all the hand of God that I was put in prison and I became the leader of Egypt. It was really to save the family's life, to save all of your lives. Because if I wouldn't have been able to come here, we would never have been able to get any straw and grain and food, and we all would have starved to death. So I see that it was all part of God's plan. And he's like, I want to thank you because you put it into motion. Now, fine, for 17 years, while their father was alive, everything seemed fine in hunky-dory. Once Jacob passed away, their father passed away, you can see that they were all very scared again. So they never fully reconciled. And in fact, that's what a relationship, part of a relationship is, that you're coming closer, but you're never really joining as one. It's going to take something else. Stay tuned. That's going to make it you actually become as one. The truth is, this is the beginning of Gullus. This is the beginning of exile. This is the beginning of the 400-year subjugation in the land of Egypt, that God said to Abraham, you people are going to get the Torah, your children will get the Torah, and everything will be great, and you'll have a lot of wealth. But you first have to go for 400 years. You have to go 400 years in Egypt. Now, if you calculated how many years we were actually slaves in Egypt, it's only 210. And that's because it really starts from now. We are now going into the land. We're now going to the land of Egypt. The entire family is moving into Egypt. And it's the beginning of Gullus, the beginning of exile. The beginning of exile. And that's what exile is. Exile is both this idea of being separate. We can't fully express who we are. We can't become one with God like we were in the land of Israel. Yet at the same time, it affords opportunities of closeness that you could never get if you remained in the land of Israel. That's what a relationship. You have the ability now to work through who you are. You're able to work through challenges, and by that you become closer. You never have that if everything's finding hunky-dory in your life. So it's, on the one hand, it's very sad because you can never fully, you're not one connected. However, it opens up for a deeper relationship, and that's what exile is all about, and that's why the exile begins here. So the brothers go ahead and they meet. I'm just going to have to do like a very high level of this class. They go ahead and meet. Just looking at my chumash over here. When he it's very interesting. When Joseph reveals himself to his brothers, who then are stunned and shocked, he says, Hayesh lechem av? Do you have a father? That's what he says. He says, yeah, I'm Joseph. Da, da, da. Do you have a father? In verse 19. Do you have a father? Now, you might think, is your father, he's really saying, is our father still alive? But that's not what he says. He says, do you have a father? Now, what's the deeper significance of that? The way the Hasidic approaches to that, and Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, the Rav, J.B. Soloveitchik, explains it. He once heard from his teacher, who was a Chabad rabbi when he was a little boy. He was asking them, are you still connected to your roots? Do you have a father? It doesn't just mean physically a father. Are you connected with your roots? Or are you someone that, like, I'm a self-made person, I've moved on from my life, I have maybe I've gone through some sort of trauma, and there's two ways to react to the trauma. You could either try to mend the relationship and you become a stronger person, a more deep person, a more reflective person, actually a more godly person, or you can become like separate. You completely separate. Now, there's times for both. He wanted to know that we have the trauma of you selling me and all these different things, and our father is never being consoled. So, have you completely, I'm on my own journey and my own path now. And he wanted, that's what he was finding out. Because if you're going to leave your roots, then you're not strong. You have to see where you've come from, and that actually helps appreciate who you are now. So that was one of the things, just a little quick Hasidic insight into that. He reveals himself to the brothers. The brothers and he shows that he pulls down his pants, and he shows that he has a circumcision, a bris milah. Now, the obvious, so most people interpret that to mean like he showed that he was Jewish. Like, I'm one of your brothers because look, I'm circumcised. The truth is, everyone was circumcised. All the Egyptians were circumcised. He made everybody circumcise themselves. So what did he show them? He showed that even though I was in a place of such decadence and disgust and immorality, and I could have had all the sexual desires I ever wanted, I never profaned it. I never got involved in it. That's how strong I am. And that's how true I remain to the Torah, which always seems to be a theme with the Jewish people, is sexual immorality. I don't know. I guess it's one of the hardest. The Rebbe Rashab says the hardest thing is food, overeating, not overeating. But it seems like this theme comes up very often. Okay. Now, so a very important point. I think I mentioned it last week. The Yehuda is the one that's going to go on. He's going to have a self-sacrifice to get Binyamin back. So basically, let me start the story a little bit back further. Once Joseph takes Benjamin captive, yeah, he's playing this whole trickery game. You know, like, he's not revealing who he is, and he takes Benjamin captive. And Yehuda promised his father Jacob that I will do anything. I will give up my portion in this world. I'll kill myself. I'll do anything I can in this world to kill myself to make sure Benjamin comes back. And not only that, but in the next world as well. And because he even made such a statement, even though Benjamin was totally fine and he wasn't really taken captive and everything was fine hunky dory, the mere fact of making such a statement left its imprint. And the Talmud tells us that Yehuda was not able to enter the next world, heaven, Gan Eden, until Moses prayed for him. Because by saying it, it made an impact, in the world. So the Rambam, this is one of the places where the Rambam brings the source of not only what we say and what we do has an impact on the world, but even what we think has an impact on the world and all of creation. So you have to be very careful with not dwelling on negative thoughts. You can't control yourself. You can't control what pops into your mind, but you can control whether you dwell on it or not. So finally they get him back. Now Joseph's gonna reveal himself. Yeah, okay. Let's see over here. Okay, so the big question is, why did Joseph ask it? So he said, Ani Yosef va'od Avichai. When he revealed himself to the brothers, he said, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? That's not what he's going to say. Actually, I want to just stop something really quickly. When Joseph takes Benjamin, these are like my favorite ideas. That's why I'm trying these ideas. When Joseph takes Benjamin, Yehuda asks him, gets really mad, and he approaches him actually to fight him and to kill him. His brother, Joseph. And he tells him, he goes in like this rant. He's like, I don't understand what you're doing to me. You're taking my brother. You asked me, do I have a father? Do you ask me if I have a brother? What's the deal with my brother? What's the deal with my father? Bring me my brother. Bring your brother. Bring your father. You're asking me 1,000 questions. I did everything you told me to do, and now you're taking my brother captive. I'm going to fight you. The big question is, the Medrash tells us what Yehuda was doing when he kept saying these, like this whole rant, like many passages are dedicated to this like long rant that Yehuda's doing. And the Medrash says it's like he's a well, there's a well. The mashal, the parable is there's a well, a very deep well, and nobody's able to get to the bottom of the well to get the water. Then comes a very wise person, and he ties rope after rope after rope, and he's able to reach very deep down and pull the water out. That is the craft of a very wise person. What Yehuda was doing was he was digging deeper and deeper into the person. He was asking all the questions to dig deeper and deeper into the person until Joseph will ultimately break down. You'll ultimately get to the point of pain, and he'll break down from there, and that's when the healing process can begin. When was a trigger that Joseph really was about to reveal himself? All this while that Joseph was asking his brothers, do you have another brother? Where is he? They kept saying he's lost. He's lost. We don't know where he is. We don't know where he is. Now Yehuda said, our brother is dead. We think our brother is dead. And once he sensed that they've moved on from him, there was like this period of separation that who knows what Yehuda really meant? But that's what he said. He said, our brother is dead. We think our brother is dead. He broke down. He saw that now they're at a point where there's no return. In other words, before they were looking for me, and now they're not looking for me anymore. And that was a pain point within him that overwhelmed him. And he told everybody to leave, all the Egyptians to leave, so that they wouldn't be embarrassed. And he cried, and then he revealed himself. Another reason why he asked if his brother was alive, if their father was alive, is because Joseph couldn't believe that Jacob was still alive, because he realized that after 22 years of pain and anguish at a person of his age, through such immeasurable pain and anguish, there's no way he would have been alive. The Barbanel says he was asking him, is he really alive? Now tell me the truth. I didn't really believe you. Tell me the truth. Is our father still alive? And now he'll be consoled. Now the brothers they search back and they go. They're kind of happy again. They're kind of happy that they found their brother, but they're also a little bit nervous. Anyway, they go back. Joseph pays for their flights, first class bus tickets back to Canaan, and says, "Go get our father." and he sends with their father, he sends with the caravan to go get their father, the escort, a bunch of cows. What was the point of the cows? So the cows, the he was trying to prove to his father that he's still alive. He knew that the brothers were going to go back, and he wasn't going to. Jacob wasn't going to believe that Joseph was still alive. So what was to prove that Joseph was still alive? So Joseph said, "Send him back these cows. These cows will remind him of what we were studying right before I was taken captive, or you guys sold me, which is about the Egla Arufa, which is about if somebody dies. I don't exactly remember the connection to but anyway, if somebody dies and the guy dies between, like, on the border of two cities, then and nobody knows who the killer is, so both cities take responsibility for the burial. And one of the things you have to do is slice a cow in half. That represents like shame, and that we're both sharing responsibility, and it's a sacrifice. So when the father saw the cows, then he knew that he was alive, because he was trying to tell him that. I remember the last thing that we studied was Egla Rufa. Yaakov is getting ready to go down to Egypt, and Yaakov is afraid. So Yaakov is ecstatic to go back to see his son. He stops in Beersheba by his grandfather's grave, and he's very nervous. He's very nervous because he knows that Egypt is a very decadent and disgusting place, and he feels that he's going to be effective. God reveals himself to him. Interestingly enough, Nachmanides, the Ramban, says it was a type. There's three types of prophecies. There's one where you sleep and you get prophecy. Okay, I don't know any of the. I don't think I've ever had any of these. So don't. Except it says when you name your child, you have prophecy. So I guess I had prophecy then. But when you sleep, you have prophecy, and then there's prophecy when you're awake, clearly awake. That's open nevuah. And there's prophecy at night. It's like you're awake, but it's at night, and it's in between the sleeping one and the awake one, the one during the day. Whether it actually happens during the day, or that's just a borrowed term, it's like a middle level. I just thought that was kind of interesting. He says to them, "Don't worry, everything will be fine." And go down there. Fine. They all go down. This is the 70 souls. There's 70 members of the family. There were 69, and then Yocheved was born. Yocheved, the mother of Moshe, was born at the border there. She's the 70th soul. We all come from one of the 70 souls. We all come from one of the 70 souls. And it says like one soul has a connection. The Zohar says one soul, I think the Zohar has each soul has a connection to each one of the 70 nations. Okay, I don't know the significance of that exactly. Maybe I have a certain affinity to a certain nation, or I don't know. Yeah, I like Japan interests me, maybe. They go down there, and one of the things that Joseph does right away, so before they go down there, he sends Levi. Yaakov sends one of his sons down to Egypt, to the land of Goshen. That's where they're going to settle. It's very fertile, wealthy, upper class. But the first thing he does is, I want you to go set up a yeshiva. And he goes and he sets up a yeshiva over there in the land of Goshen. So we always send places of, if you're ever in a situation, you always have to have places of study that you're going to go to, because that's going to remind you of who you are, and it's going to keep you sane. So they go. Now that yeshiva is going to flourish, and ultimately the whole tribe of Levi is going to continue to study even throughout the exile. That's why Moses and Aaron were able to speak to Pharaoh and not be enslaved and all these different things, because they were removed from the exile. They had nothing to do with the exile. But one of the things that Joseph does is that he uproots every single person from where they lived in the land of Egypt and moved them around. Nobody was living in the same place anymore. And the reason why he did it is because he didn't want his family to be like the newcomers coming in, where people would be like scrutinizing them and asking who they are, and like, who are you coming in our land, and da 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 da. So everyone was like new. Everyone felt uncomfortable. Everybody felt vulnerable. One of the things is that sometimes, in order to get things done, you can't be fair. We see that God himself is not fair. When we land the land of Israel, certain families got larger portions of land than other families, bottom line. And some of them were in areas that were very wealthy, very rich in soil, rich in gold and silver, and da da da. But there's no such thing as being fair. Let me just say that. Dun, 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 dun. Anyway, another. Oh, it says over here, Yaakov, Yosef offers, he makes a carbon, and he says Elokei Yitzchak. He doesn't say Elokei Yaakov or Elokei Avram. When he gives up the sacrifice, he says the God of Yitzchak. Why does he say the God of Yitzchak? So there's a big question in halacha: is honoring who should get more honor, your parents or your grandparents? So the Gemara, the Talmud brings from this episode, from right here, that says the fact that Joseph brought a sacrifice in the name of his grandfather. Why did he do that? Because it actually showed honor to his father. His father got a lot of pleasure from that and was honored by that. Honoring your grandparents is part of honoring your parents. That's what it says. It's you can show that's part of the mitzvah of honoring your parents is honoring your grandparents. Who gets first dibs? Question, toss up. Who gets first dibs? Do you honor your spouse first or your parents first? Anybody know?
Spouse.
Your spouse, grandparents.
What, you got to pick one. What do you mean? You got to pick one. No, your spouse. Exactly. Your spouse gets first dibs. Very good. Your spouse gets first dibs. You're actually closer to your spouse than you are to your parents. Hopefully, that's what happens. I just want to end it over here. It's very interesting. Hashem tells Yaakov, one of the things that Yaakov was worried about is where he was going to be buried and how he was going to be buried, which is actually an incredibly interesting story. And I'll end it over here. And one of the things was, don't worry. God says to Yosef, to Yaakov, don't worry. Your sons will cover your eyes. What does that mean? So the Zohar tells us, right before a person passes away, well, the son should not happen to any of us, but right before a person passes away, they're shown a divine light. They're shown like a revelation of godliness. And then soul departs. What we do is we close the eyes. You have to close the eyes. It's usually done by the child. The son usually closes the eyes of the parent, if that's possible, and you put dirt on the eyelids of the deceased. And the reason is you bury the eyes right away because we don't want the eyes to witness anything else. We want it to be, that's the last thing it should see, and then it becomes buried. The body itself, the physical body, becomes buried. And it's very interesting because the eyes also represent, the windows of the soul. That's where the soul is most present, the most wherever we look at your eyes. I look at your eyes when I talk to you because that's where your soul is most revealed. And it basically covers all the bases of the rest of the body. So he was worried about, will people know how to bury me properly? And that's true. Now, just a story that I know I've told many times. It's a very famous story. So when they were going to bury Yaakov, Esav shows up. And he wanted to be in front, to carry in front of Yosef. And I'm sorry, no. They go to Mars Machpelah, they go to Hebron, and they go to bury him. Joseph comes, he has to get permission from Pharaoh. Interesting enough. He goes, fine. He goes and they get ready to bury him. Esav comes, he makes a big stink. He says, "You're burying him in my burial plot." And they said, "No, we're not. You sold your birthright to Yaakov, and he stole it from you, but you sold it to him." And he's like, "Bring me the proof, right?" So Don, I know I've told this story recently. Dan had only one son. Dan, one of the children of Bilhah and Yaakov, had one son, Hushim. And Hushim, what was unique about him? He was deaf. He couldn't hear. So there was a big argument taking place right in front of him. And I think I just saw this like a month ago. There's a big argument taking place right in front of him. And he sees that Esau's fighting and they're fighting. And finally they tell Naphtali to go run because Naphtali's super fast. Go run and get the document that shows that the birthright was sold. And he's like, "What's taking so long? This is very disrespectful." And the brothers point with sign language that Esav is causing all the problems. Hushim takes out his sword, chops off Esav's head. Esav's head rolls into that burial plot. We don't need to we don't need to wait for the document anymore. And they go and they bury Yaakov there. Yosef is also so Esav's head is also buried there. Now Don, interestingly enough, Hushim, he had special needs. when they enter the land of Israel, Dan is going to have the most people entering the land of Israel. Well, it's not the most, but he's going to have the third most, but it's going to be like completely disproportionate how many children he has. And the Torah is trying to teach us just because somebody's born with special needs or they have some special needs doesn't mean they can't be as productive, if not more productive, than anybody born with all of everything seemingly working well. Okay, that's it for today. Anybody have any questions?
No, I'm confused about the like. So the head roll into the grave that he was supposed to have, and where the body is now is totally different places, right?
Yeah, I don't exactly know where. It's a good question. I don't exactly know if they're like if he's like in a corner or something, or they buried his head. It's a good question. I can probably look it up, but I don't know. It's a good question. If anybody knows, speak up.
That's
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah. All right. Peace and love, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. We'll see you later. See you guys.
Good.
Rabbi,
Yeah. Who's that?
about honoring between honoring parents and spouse, you know, there is this connection of Shabbat, Malka, like the Kala. So on the same pasuk that is written, you should honor your parents, you know, Kaved et avicha ve'et imecha, and also ve'et shabbatotai tishmeru. So like seems like there is a connection between honoring the spouse and honoring Shabbat. What do you think about?
I have to think. You're saying on the tablets they're across from each other. Is that what you mean? They're not actually. I don't know. Let me think about it. I have to think about it.
On the same pasuk, I believe, on Tevarim, when it's written Kaved et avicha ve'et imecha, and
Yeah.
also on the same pasuk, ve'et shabbatotai tishmeru.
I don't know. Okay, I'm sure there's an
So
answer. I don't know. Yeah.
I confess that I heard this one because I thought, between your spouse and your parents, but of course, I thought about that and maybe it would be a connection.
There probably is. There must be. If that's how it is, there's definitely a connection. But either I learned it and I don't remember, or I'm not even sure. Well, for sure, I know I'm not sure. I don't know the answer.
All right. Thanks so much.
No
Amazing
problem.
class as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Be well. See you, Moshe, Bella, Yisrael. Good to see you guys.